Germany's worst airborne disaster, the Battle of Crete.
The Battle of Crete, fought between May 20th and June 1st, 1941, was one of the most dramatic and costly operations in the history of Nazi Germany's military campaigns. This battle, known as Operation Mercury, was the largest airborne invasion ever attempted by Nazi Germany, and ultimately led to what many historians regard as Germany's worst airborne disaster. Although the Germans managed to conquer the island after a fierce 13-day battle, the cost was staggering, nearly wiping out an entire division of their elite paratroopers, the Fallschirmjäger. To understand the significance of the Battle of Crete, we must first explore the strategic importance of the island and the context in which the invasion occurred. After the fall of mainland Greece in April 1941, the remaining Allied forces withdrew to Crete to reinforce the garrison there. However, the situation for the defenders was dire from the outset. The rapid evacuation from Greece had forced them to leave behind most of their heavy equipment, including artillery, vehicles, and crucial supplies. The Allies were left with only small arms, limited ammunition, and whatever makeshift defences they could muster. Despite these challenges, the Royal Navy's control of the Mediterranean made an amphibious invasion of Crete impossible for the Germans. The Luftwaffe, enjoying air superiority over the region, conducted frequent bombing raids on the island, but the Allies held firm. Meanwhile, the German High Command began to consider how to invade the island without the benefit of naval superiority. Some within the German military believed that the resources required for such an invasion would be better spent on the impending invasion of the Soviet Union, codenamed Operation Barbarossa. However, Adolf Hitler, influenced by concerns that the British could use Crete as a base to launch attacks on Axis supply lines and vital oil fields in Romania, eventually authorized the operation. Operation Mercury was spearheaded by General Kurt Student, commander of the Luftwaffe's Fallschirmjäger, and strongly supported by Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe. The plan called for the largest airborne invasion in history, with the primary objective being the capture of the Maleme airfield, the largest on Crete. Securing this airfield would allow the rapid deployment of additional troops and supplies, enabling the Germans to consolidate their hold on the island. The operation also targeted two smaller airfields and the port of Suda Bay, a critical logistical hub for the Allied forces. On May 20th, 1941, the operation began with a massive aerial bombardment of Allied positions on Crete, followed by the arrival of waves of German paratroopers and glider-borne troops. The Germans had hoped to achieve surprise, but unbeknownst to them, British intelligence had already cracked the Nazis' Enigma codes. As a result, the Allies were well prepared for the invasion, with defensive positions strategically placed to exploit the vulnerabilities of an airborne assault. The German paratroopers faced immediate and intense resistance as they descended from the skies. The Allies, particularly the New Zealand troops positioned near Maleme, took full advantage of the paratroopers' moment of vulnerability during their descent. Hundreds of German soldiers were killed before they even reached the ground, and many of those who survived found themselves almost defenseless, armed only with pistols and knives. The weapons intended for their use had been dropped separately in canisters, many of which were destroyed or landed far from their intended recipients. The battle quickly became a brutal and chaotic struggle for control of the Malem airfield. Group West, the largest of the German assault groups, managed to secure a tenuous foothold near the airfield by the end of the first day, but their position was far from secure. The New Zealand defenders, though poorly equipped and running low on ammunition, fought with fierce determination, inflicting heavy casualties on the German forces. By the evening of May 20th, it was clear that Operation Mercury was not going as planned. The Germans had failed to achieve their primary objectives, and the prospect of a successful invasion seemed increasingly uncertain. However, a critical mistake by the Allied command would soon turn the tide in favour of the Germans. The New Zealand forces, fearing that they were on the verge of being overwhelmed, decided to withdraw from their positions overlooking the Maleme airfield. This decision, made in the heat of battle and without full knowledge of the situation, allowed the Germans to seize the airfield on May 21st. With Maleme airfield in German hands, the Luftwaffe quickly began airlifting reinforcements and supplies onto the island, despite suffering heavy losses from Allied artillery fire. The arrival of these reinforcements proved to be a turning point in the battle. Over the next few days, the Germans gradually expanded their control over western Crete, pushing the Allied forces eastward and further consolidating their hold on the island. The Allied defenders, composed of British, Australian, New Zealand, and Greek forces, fought valiantly but were ultimately outnumbered and outgunned. The rugged terrain of Crete, while offering some defensive advantages, also made communication and coordination among the Allied forces difficult. The Germans, on the other hand, had the advantage of superior air support and a steady flow of reinforcements through the Maleme airfield. Despite these challenges, the Allies launched several counterattacks in an attempt to retake the airfield and halt the German advance. The most significant of these occurred on the night of May 21st, 22, when the New Zealand 22nd and 23rd Battalions mounted a desperate assault on the German positions at Maleme. The attack, hampered by delays and confusion, ultimately failed, and the Germans were able to maintain control of the airfield. As the battle dragged on, the situation for the Allies became increasingly dire. The Germans, now firmly in control of Maleme, began to push southward and eastward, capturing key positions and driving the Allied forces into an ever-shrinking defensive perimeter. The Allies, facing constant air attacks, dwindling supplies, and mounting casualties, were forced to retreat towards the southern coast of the island. One of the most dramatic moments of the battle occurred on May 27th, during the fighting around the villages of 42nd Street and Souda Bay. In a last-ditch effort to slow the German advance and buy time for the evacuation of Allied forces, the New Zealand 28th Maori Battalion launched a bayonet charge against the advancing German troops. This desperate assault, known as the Battle of 42nd Street, temporarily halted the German advance and allowed thousands of Allied soldiers to escape to the southern beaches, where they were evacuated by the Royal Navy. The evacuation, which took place between May 28th and June 1st, 1941, was a heroic effort by the Royal Navy to rescue as many of the beleaguered defenders as possible. However, the evacuation was conducted under constant threat from the Luftwaffe, which launched repeated air attacks on the evacuation fleet. Despite these dangers, the Royal Navy managed to evacuate over 16,000 soldiers from Crete, but around 5,000 men were left behind and captured by the Germans. The Battle of Crete ended in a Pyrrhic victory for the Germans. Although they had succeeded in capturing the island, the cost was staggering. The Germans suffered over 6,000 casualties, including many of their elite paratroopers, and lost nearly 300 aircraft. These losses were so severe that Adolf Hitler, who had initially been enthusiastic about the use of airborne forces, became deeply disillusioned with the concept. He concluded that the element of surprise, which had been a key factor in the success of earlier airborne operations, was now lost, and he ordered that the Fallschirmjäger never be used again in a large-scale airborne invasion. The Battle of Crete was not only a significant military event, but also had far-reaching implications for the conduct of the war. For the Germans, the heavy losses sustained during the battle highlighted the limitations of airborne operations and the need for more conventional tactics in future campaigns. The Luftwaffe's inability to adequately support the invasion and the logistical challenges of supplying an airborne force in hostile territory also underscored the vulnerabilities of Germany's military strategy. For the Allies, the Battle of Crete was a bitter defeat, but it also provided valuable lessons that would be applied in future operations. The importance of air superiority, the need for effective communication and coordination among ground forces, and the dangers of underestimating an enemy's capabilities were all lessons that would shape Allied strategy in the years to come. The battle also had a profound impact on the civilian population of Crete. The island's inhabitants, who had fiercely resisted the German invasion, were subjected to brutal reprisals by the occupying forces. Villages were burned, civilians were executed, and many were deported to concentration camps. This harsh treatment only fueled the Cretan resistance, which continued to harass the German occupiers throughout the war. In the years following the war, the Battle of Crete became a symbol of both the bravery and the tragedy of those who fought there. For the German Fallschirmjäger, it was remembered as the graveyard of their airborne hopes, a place where their elite status was forever tarnished by the heavy losses they incurred. For the Allies, it was a reminder of the high cost of war and the sacrifices made by the soldiers and civilians who stood against the might of the Axis powers. Today, the Battle of Crete is commemorated in memorials and museums on the island, honouring the memory of those who fought and died there. The battle remains a poignant chapter in the history of World War II, a testament to the courage and determination of the soldiers on both sides, and a sobering reminder of the human cost of conflict.